Hey, class of 2020, how are you? For your next assignment, you're going to walk your neighborhood and find a house that you think is really interesting. You're going to stop at the curb and stare at it for a little bit and figure out what is so intriguing about this house. You need to take a picture of it also, and you're going to end up writing a whole page about why this house is really cool. Next time we meet for Zoom, you're going to get into breakout rooms and we will share the pictures that you have of your favorite house. Cannot be your own house. Um, so, my wife and I have been walking our neighborhoods during the COVID-19 era. We get up early and we put our masks on and we walk. And I'm going to show you some of the houses in our neighborhood. It's going to give you a few ideas. So um, we live on Pacific Coast Highway, famous Pacific Coast Highway. We live in a little community of houses. They're freestanding townhomes. It's nice. There's about 90 homes here. It's well gardened, and we're lucky. We've got really good neighbors. Sometimes I do get a little house envy. Um, because I grew up in a house with a big yard in South Dakota, and I don't have that here. Um, but we've got a nice location. And so as you walk down this little brick walk, you turn the corner and you can see Palos Verdes right there. And walk a little bit closer and you can see some of the houses. Some of the houses going up the hill, that is the Hollywood Riviera. It's Torrance, and then you get to Palos Verdes. That's a little better view of the walk that we're going to take right now. Okay, so before we start to elevating, down here at ground level, practically sea level, we have a couple houses. One thing I like about the Riviera Village is there is about 10 decades worth of houses there and different styles. And there's a big eclectic nature. California is kind of famous for its eclectic housing. Um, some good, some not so good, but maybe you didn't know how famous some of our houses are. This one on the left is a Craftsman-Style house, and I really like this. It's not a very big house, but the Craftsman kind of made California famous way back in 1909. And that's when a couple brothers, the Green brothers, spelled with an E at the end, made a house in Pasadena called the Gamble House. And they put a lot of craft into it. It's almost like woodworking with furniture. Some of it is pretty well known for its porches and its cantilevered roof there. I'll quick show you the Gamble House. There it is. You should go visit it sometime. It is much bigger than the little bungalows that you have down at the beach. Um, anyway, that's a very nice little house. And right next to it is a house with a turret. And there are a lot of turrets in Palos Verdes and Torrance. I think a lot of kids, when they're little, they say they want a house with a tower, a castle. They want to live in a castle. And this is a cute little house, and I think it's proportioned really well. But I'm just wondering if it's the right kind of house for Southern California. And that's what you want to think about partly is location for your house too. Does it work in the location that we live in? California is known for its ranch style houses and also its mid-century modern houses. Um, I don't really have a classic mid-century modern house on my walk here. There aren't as many in the Hollywood Riviera, but I do like this house quite a bit. It's got the cathedral ceiling, and it's got the ceiling to floor windows, which gives you more of an inside outside feel. be a part of the good weather here in Southern California. There's a house that I would call postmodern, and we'll get to that on the next slide, I believe. But I did want to point out that I'm going to talk a little bit about garages. And here's a garage that is kind of hidden from this view. And I think that's a good thing. Okay, here is a brand new house that came in, and this, you would call this postmodern. Um, let's see, there's another view of it. It's a little bit boxy, it's a little bright. You see on this side, there aren't very many windows. I do like lots of windows and big windows, but you have kind of the privacy on this side. And then the back side really has ceiling to floor windows. I can just barely see it from the park down below. And you would probably call this postmodern. Here's another one with the turret. How do you like this one? I'm not a big fan of this one. I think it just kind of dominates the whole building too much. And that's where you had a boy said, when I grow up, I'm going to have a house with the biggest tower, turret, castle-like thing of all. So this one I don't think is my favorite. It looks a little better from this point of view. Here is the most famous house in the Hollywood Riviera, and it was built in 1926, I believe. The reason it's called the Hollywood Riviera is because in the 20s, many Hollywood moguls thought they would move to Redondo Beach and build a second home near the beach, a summer home. And some of them did, and they were pretty wealthy, and so you wouldn't really call them summer cottages. But unfortunately, not as many moved in as they thought. And that was because Redondo Beach was a pretty racist town 100 years ago. In fact, in their laws or bylaws, they had anti-Semitic or laws in there that said you couldn't be Jewish and own a house. So that is awful. And a lot of Jews who were in Hollywood were turned away because of that. So this one does have a tower, a turret, but look how it's just a part of the whole bigger building. It doesn't overwhelm it. It is very Italianate, and this sort of Mediterranean style house was really popular in the 20s and 30s. That's another view of it. This is another famous house going up the hill from the same era, Spanish revival. And I love how it is sort of cut away back into the hill. It's a big house that doesn't seem very big. And I think that's kind of hard to pull off. And I love that about it. Its scale is really nice. I thought I would talk about garage doors, and here I am. Here's a house from the 80s. You can tell the style because that kind of came back again, the Mediterranean style. I don't think it was done very well in the 80s. I think it was too much an imitation of the Mediterranean style. This one's not bad, but there's 3-car garages were really important in the 80s. And sometimes the garages take up too much of the curb life. And it's hard to hide a garage. I know that in the Midwest where I grew up, you often had alleyways and the garages were separate behind the house. So you would drive down the alleyway and park into your garage and then walk to your house, so that the curbside appeal was just the house. But then, you know, people want their garages attached, and I get that. I don't think we're going back to that separate garage thing. Another house that I like a lot, and my wife really likes it. She calls it the Pirates of the Caribbean house because it's got a little New Orleans style up here with the porch. The Spanish tile, the Mexican tile is and around the door. I do really like cool doors. And the gardening there with the succulent garden is nice. you might want to think about the proportion of your house. Is it symmetrical or asymmetrical? This one is a little asymmetrical. And do you like that or not? Sometimes I really like the asymmetry of a house, and sometimes I don't. You got to figure out why it works and why it doesn't. The landscaping is something you can consider. So I just kind of snapped this one as I walked by. It reminded me more of an English garden, and the English garden is famous for letting nature just kind of go its own way. I guess it's a misnomer that they just let it grow wild, but you kind of tame nature barely. You craft it a little bit, but you let it grow the way nature wants it to. This one needs a little work. But there's a little sign that says they don't use pesticides. That's kind of cool. The French, on the other hand, the French garden is you put order to nature, and there it's very orderly, their gardens, and often you can't sit on the grass in some of the parks in France. All right, there we have a bird of paradise, quite a few, and it's really nice. Another style of house that is famous in Palos Verdes is called the birdhouse house. Um, so there was a builder that came from the Midwest, and he built about 3,000 houses in the 50s, some in the San Fernando Valley and quite a few in Palos Verdes and Torrance. They're kind of charming. They all have a birdhouse or a dovecote, which is where the pigeons or the doves nest, sometimes other birds. They usually have a diamond bar window, framed window, and then this batten and board siding is pretty well done. You can't see it here. Yeah, no, I didn't get a good picture of it, but they usually had a fireplace too. And some people really like fireplaces, and then other Southern California people say, we don't really need a fireplace here. It's not essential. A lot of cottagey kinds of places in PV. I know Deppelgray Lane is pretty famous for theirs. So this one I think is a little too cutesy for me around the windows. The decoration I don't really care for there. Sometimes people really want to bring back the rustic rural nostalgia of homes, the barn-like homes, and there are a lot of horses and stables in Palos Verdes, so that makes sense. So a wagon wheel, antiques. Does it get a little kitschy, or do you think it works? Here's a turret that works for me. It's kind of nestled back there. Now I'm almost to the top of Torrance. I'm kind of going up, and you can't tell here, but this house was not designed well because the garage is this place with the view. And here you can see how the view is down there, and there's the garage. It should have been twisted around, and I think if you have a house with the potential for a view, you really need to use that view. This house, I wanted to just mention the railing. It doesn't serve a purpose. It is just cosmetic. And sometimes it's nice to have a little decorative element that doesn't do anything. But usually railings are supposed to do something. So I don't know. Do you like it? I met this guy. He built his own castle right in front of his house instead of turning his house into a castle. And he was very fun to talk to. Here's a house that takes up a nice corner lot. A really nice looking Tudor house, European style. Just wondering if it works for Southern California. Here, it looks like they've got a couple pelicans to kind of remind you that they're at the beach. And that is a very unusual fireplace. I don't know enough about that. It might even be Moorish. Yeah, so I guess I'm going to keep going. I do think the windows could be bigger. It does have a really nice view of the ocean. Um, and I like big windows. I like ceiling to floor windows. Here's a house on a street that splits and you can't see it. So I think they value their privacy. The trees all around on the sides. I think you can see a little better on the other side, but that public-private issue is one to always consider. Maybe they're the most neighborly people in the Western world. I don't know, but it seems like they're trying to hide themselves behind there. I mentioned I like doors, and these doors are really nice. It probably Asian motif with the doors. I do like the gardening around it too. Another succulent garden. Okay, I've actually crossed up into Palos Verdes. You can't drive through from Torrance, but you can walk through. And there's the houses are a little bigger up here, and there's some very nice houses. I do like this a lot. I think it's newer, but here I think they've historically captured some of that Italian, Spanish, Mediterranean house and Mexican house that can look so nice. Okay, now I'm going to finish with this, and this is my favorite house. And if I were to write a paper, and I'm not, you will, I would pick this house. At first, I thought, wow, a Swiss chalet. Everyone seems to be importing their favorite house into Southern California. But then I noticed some things I really liked about it, the ceiling to floor uh, doors, the windows that are probably movable doors. The garage kind of goes down below the ground level and it's practically hidden. And it's got the cathedral ceiling, so you know inside it's kind of airy. I'm sure it is. And the little plants add a lot of warmth to it, the wood and the plants. I didn't notice, though, how great it was until I walked a little further beyond it. And there it is. There is that stained glass window. And when the sun comes up in the morning behind it, it is really spectacular. Look at that. There's some trophies up there too. If this is your house, you should invite me over because I would like to see it a little better. But the morning light is really good, and especially the way it kind of works with the really high eucalyptus trees around it. Okay, so that's the end of my thing here. I'm going to give you a few more details in an email. So anyway, thanks for coming and sayonara.